Hey everybody, it is Monday, October 21st. You're listening to the Mo News Podcast. As we start a new week here, I'm Moshe Wanunu.
And I'm Jill Wagner. This is the place where we bring you just the facts.
And we read all the news and read between the lines so you don't have to. Happy Monday to you all. 15 days till Election Day, Jill.
Moshe, about 2 weeks to Election Day and about 10 days to Halloween. And it feels like, at least in my house and on my Instagram feed, Halloween festivities have started. We were at a Halloween party. I feel like everybody's posting pictures of their kids in their Halloween costumes. So we're in the spirit already.
Yeah, Halloween's the new Christmas. It's like a whole season.
Yeah.
It's not a day. It's not a week.
No, it starts October 1st, basically. It's a month, I think.
Right. With the menus, the pumpkin menu, like the pumpkin-related menu, we already talked about. It started back in August. But like the decorations, I feel like are up earlier and earlier these days. People, they need an escape from reality, which we're about to give you a dose of in today's podcast.
And I was going to say, I'm totally okay with it. I get it. I need an escape from reality. So thank you for the Halloween party my neighbors threw this past weekend. All right, Moshe, let's get to the news. Donald Trump serves up fries at McDonald's, taking his attacks on Kamala Harris up to another level in terms of the language that he used, while Harris is campaigning across swing states and getting a bit of a serenade for her 60th birthday.
Yeah, Stevie Wonder giving her a custom happy birthday over the weekend.
We also discuss Elon Musk's latest spending for Trump and calls to investigate his promise to give one Pennsylvania voter $1 million each day if they sign a petition that he is promoting.
The world's richest man getting really deep into politics this fall.
The U.S. is investigating a leak of top secret Israeli plans to attack Iran. The latest on what was leaked and why U.S. officials are so concerned about where the plans ended up. It comes as Israel is warning Iran about the consequence of a weekend drone strike on the Israeli prime minister's house. Meanwhile, Cuba is dealing with the worst island-wide power outage ever ahead of a hurricane hitting the country. The latest challenges for the Professional Women's Network chief. And speaking of women, women are now outpacing men when it comes to getting tattoos.
Yeah, we'll tell you about the trend line and also why some medical professionals are concerned.
And the latest on the World Series matchup. And Moshe is on this day in history.
Jill, your clue today. The rain in Spain falls mainly in the plain.
All right, let's...
It's a weather report / clue for On This Day in History.
Okay, let's get to some news here. Election Day, 2 weeks from tomorrow, and Donald Trump and Kamala Harris were out over the weekend crisscrossing multiple battleground states, including Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Georgia, and Michigan, making their closing pitch to voters. Former President Trump serving up French fries to supporters Sunday at a Philadelphia area McDonald's. The campaign visit was designed to troll Harris, who has talked about working at one of the fast food chain's restaurants when she was younger. Trump has accused Harris of lying about the experience as a way to improve her working class credibility. Here's a bit of him serving one customer who was pre-vetted by the campaign at the drive-thru.
Do this all day. I wouldn't mind this job. I like this job. I think I might come back and do it again.
Thank you.
Look at that. Look at that. How are you?
Thank you, Mr. President.
Nice to see you.
You made it possible for ordinary people like us to meet you.
You're not ordinary.
I mean,
Moshe, I think the comments on your Instagram to this video were right, which is like, it doesn't look real. It doesn't feel like it's real. And then you're like, oh my God, that actually
is him.
is
McDonald's
him.
drive-through. It looked like AI photos. I was like, well, to do it. And I was like, no, oh my God, these are all real. He's at the drive-through. He's making the French fries. He's salting the French fries. This was actually a McDonald's franchise owned by a supporter. Democrats point out, this was all pre-vetted, right? They made sure that Trump supporters drove through the drive-through. You could hear that guy.
So over the top.
It's over the. He later says, "You took a bullet for us, Mr. President." And Trump's like, "You know what? That's true. That's true. I did." So I will say at the same time, if you think this was the first pre-vetted activity a presidential candidate, Democrat or Republican's ever been through with only supporters, I have a bridge to sell you in Brooklyn. Okay, it happens all the time. The point is, those images get out there, and that was part of his goal. Jill, they've been talking about this for a while.
Right. So Harris, according to her campaign, worked at a McDonald's in Alameda, California 41 years ago during the summer of 1983. She was a student at Howard University at the time. She worked the register as well as the French fry and ice cream machines. Harris and McDonald's have not produced any evidence proving that she worked at least part-time at the fast food chain for several weeks 41 years ago. And that lack of evidence has led Trump to claim that she is making it up.
Right. So she's saying, the campaign's saying, listen, this was 41 years ago. It was a part-time job in the early 80s. There's no, like, she didn't keep her pay stub from 41 years ago from the franchise. But Trump's like, all right, so you're totally making it up. And remember, Harris has been saying she grew up middle class. Trump, obviously, a billionaire, but trying to appeal to the middle class. So he's been trying to, claim that there's no evidence of this. In fact, he said at one point during the visit yesterday, I have now worked at McDonald's longer after 15 minutes than Kamala Harris ever did.
And it came a day after Trump took his attacks on Harris up to another level in Pennsylvania Saturday night, even using a vulgar obscenity to describe her 3.5 years as vice president. Warning, the word comes within the first 15 seconds if you want to skip ahead. If not, take a listen.
So you have to tell Kamala Harris that you've had enough, that you just can't take it anymore. We can't stand you. You're a shit vice president. The worst. You're the worst vice president. Kamala, you're fired. Get the hell out of here. You're fired. Get out of here. Get the hell out of here, Kamala.
Jill, the reason that soundbite caught my attention is, having covered now campaigns going back to 2004, I remember when there was a reluctance not so long ago to call your opponent a liar, that like calling them a liar, like, oh my God, I can't believe they use that word. And now we've gotten to the point where in 2024, he's dropping the S word there, literally to describe Kamala Harris's tenure as VP, when there's a lot of words in English language you could use, and he's used them, right? Failure, terrible, a whole variety of things, his opinion here. And for him to go that far, I think, caught even longtime political watchers by surprise.
At that rally, Trump hammered her on immigration, inflation, foreign policy, and his traditional key topics, although he also went off script and on a tangent that also caught some people by surprise about famous golfer Arnold Palmer. He was speaking at an airport named after Palmer, and he told stories about him, including how other golfers were impressed by the size of his genitals in the shower.
Jill, it was the first 10 minutes of the rally there in Pennsylvania. And another thing that caught folks by surprise. In fact, I took a break on Instagram over the weekend. When I saw the headline, I'm like, I'm taking a break from politics. I cannot believe we are here. And yet here we are. And so if you see those headlines, in fact, yes, that was discussed over the weekend at a Trump rally.
Harris, meanwhile, is responding not to that, but to the vulgar term that he used to describe her tenure Sunday, telling MSNBC that, quote, the American people deserve so much better. She went on to talk about the importance of the president setting a standard, not only nationally, but internationally, saying that Trump's behavior, quote, demeans the office.
So, haven't seen anything like this before, Jill. When you talk to people, a lot of times when it comes to Trump voters, but also Harris voters, they'll say, I'm voting for the policies, not the person. In some cases, over the weekend, Speaker Mike Johnson, top Republican on Capitol Hill, was asked about the Trump attack, using the vulgar term there, talking about Arnold Palmer's, what was below the belt. And Mike Johnson, framed it this way: Trump is the most attacked, maligned political figure in U.S. history. And so, voters are willing to, this is Johnson here, give a little on his social media posts and some fun language that he uses at rallies. That was the way Johnson described it. So there was a time not so long ago in American politics where that might have been a bigger story. But here we are. And Johnson says, I'll excuse it because of what people say about Donald Trump.
And there are some people who like that about Donald Trump, that they feel like he's a regular person. He's not a politician, even though he's been president for 4 years. So you'd have to imagine that to some voters, it's endearing.
Yeah, I mean, it's part of his working class appeal, right? Despite the fact that he has many more zeros on his net worth than the average person, that ultimately here, he talks, like the average dude, especially since we've seen this major gender divide here. But, there's a lot of women Trump supporters who will excuse it as well, saying, I believe in his policies. And some will even admit, I don't love the way that he talks sometimes. But ultimately, I'm voting, for policies that I feel were better for this country and better for me. So again, you see that play out in polling too, where you ask people like, who do I think, who do I connect with more on a personality level? And you might see certain polling that shows advantage Harris there, but then when it comes to key policies, immigration, economy, etc., you continue to see an advantage for Trump. So that was a bit of Trump over the weekend. Kamala Harris was also out in the campaign trail. She was out with a couple of celebrities. She had Lizzo with her in Michigan. She had Usher with her in Atlanta. It was also her 60th birthday yesterday, Jill. She turned 60 years old, and so celebrated while she was out in the campaign trail in Georgia. That included 2 church events on Sunday morning. She began at a Baptist church in Stonecrest, where the pastor encouraged Black men and women to vote for Harris. Then she made a stop at Jonesboro, Georgia, at a church there where Stevie Wonder, the singer, happened to be in attendance. And so naturally, a man who has a famous happy birthday song and who supports Kamala Harris, saying happy birthday to her. They brought out the keyboard, etc. Take a listen to a bit of Stevie Wonder and the congregation.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy Vice President. And everybody sing.
Well, that's not too shabby, Moshe.
No, Kamala Harris called it a bucket list experience. She said that she was blessed. Though you do see, if you watch the video, and by the way, I would encourage you guys, go check out the Instagram account, both the McDonald's video as well as the happy birthday video, because the audio only does it so much justice. Kamala Harris is just like us when it comes to the happy birthday song. Even with Stevie Wonder singing it, she's sort of standing there. It's always awkward to have happy birthday sung to you, even when it's like a mega superstar. But that's pretty rare, right? Like you can imagine, Paul McCartney, the Beatles have their happy birthday version, right? So like if Paul McCartney sings you happy birthday, or like Stevie Wonder sings you happy birthday, that's sort of a next level happy birthday.
Right. And she does look a little bit awkward, like she's not entirely sure what to do. And it's a longer song. The regular happy birthday is kind of short. It's like 20 seconds.
It's 20 seconds. This is like he's doing the full version. The congregation is singing, and she's just sort of swaying up there, and she's like, oh my God, this is probably like 4 minutes of people singing me happy birthday.
Not another verse.
And there's another verse. You did the full thing.
And I do just want to comment, because you mentioned Usher and Lizzo had come out on the campaign trail for her. It is interesting because Usher and Lizzo, particularly Lizzo, are not without controversy. Lizzo was basically canceled just a few months ago, accused of body shaming people on her staff.
Right, mistreating her dancers.
Yeah, I mean, so again, she is somebody not without controversy. It's interesting that the Harris campaign felt like the pros, I guess, outweighed the cons of having her on the campaign trail with her.
Right. She's a Michigan native, Detroit native. And so she, as she struggles right now, Harris struggles in Michigan to try to win that key state. They're pulling out all the stops. So if Lizzo can help them win over some voters, despite some of the baggage that Lizzo has, then so be it. Same thing with Usher, by the way. There's, various accusations in terms of his relationship with Diddy, especially as Diddy now faces trial for a variety of, accused of a variety of terrible things. So will Usher eventually become a part of those allegations? Unclear. In the meantime, the bet that the Harris campaign is making is that they're clear at least for 15 more days with Lizzo and Usher.
Right. Just nothing come out for two more weeks, please.
All right. Meanwhile here, it's also turning out to be an election fight between billionaires. Jill, Elon Musk, super aggressive as he campaigns for Donald Trump, really ratcheting up his rhetoric, but also the amount of money he's putting behind the Trump campaign. He made a splash over the weekend, announcing on Saturday that his super PAC is going to be donating $1 million daily to one person who signs his petition. Now, he has a petition out there. It's pretty simple. It just says, I support the First and Second Amendment. And then if you sign it, if you're a Pennsylvania voter, you get $100. Now he's saying one person every day who signs the petition will get $1 million. He made the announcement Saturday night at a town hall meeting in Pennsylvania. He gave out the first $1 million check to a guy. You know, it's like one of those like oversized lotto style checks. He handed it to the guy who's like walking down like it's Price of Right, like running down the aisle there, being like, "Oh my God, I'm obsessed with you." Anyway, it led to a number of you being like, "Is this even legal?" Well, I don't know. I got to look further into this. The whole thing is a little unique here, Jill, because it's a petition. He's giving $1 million a day to a petition. And the petition is simply like, hey, I signed a petition that says I respect the First and Second Amendment, the freedom of speech and right to bear arms. So Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, a Democrat, was asked about this over the weekend. He happens to be the former attorney general of the state. He said that the pledge here is deeply concerning, and he thinks that there should be an investigation here into the spending around this race, how the dark money is flowing in Pennsylvania, but also into the pockets of Pennsylvanians. The petition here, is this legal? Is this not? You know, various legal election law experts are chiming in here, but it comes, Jill, as he's also putting dark money, what's called dark money, into his super PAC, the Future Coalition PAC. And this is a story that broke over the weekend, that Elon Musk, through the Future Coalition PAC, is running digital ads on Snapchat and other social media that targets Jews and Muslims with different ads. Now, the Jews in Pennsylvania are getting an ad purportedly from Harris that says, I'm super pro-Palestinian. Then you have Muslim voters in Michigan who are getting an ad from Harris talking about how much she loves Israel. So while in many cases PACs tend to be more transparent, being like, this is the super PAC for Donald Trump to tell you why Kamala Harris is bad, this is like ads pretending to be from Kamala Harris, but targeting people to upset them about their views, in particular around the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And so, Jill, just sort of the latest form of dirty campaigning here. But again, that is also renewing attention here. Is like, is everything that he's doing legal here? Or given how loose our election laws are, election spending laws are, is this okay? A reminder, context, people are like, oh my God. I'm like, well, for 250 years, there's been dirty campaigning. Thomas Jefferson and John Adams like ran dirty campaigns against each other, talking about, you know, a whole variety of personal attacks. So this has been going on for a very long time, but this is sort of a new form of it on Snapchat, on social media, and again, very subversive, right? Running an ad that you say is for Harris, but is intended to basically upset certain voters who might vote for Harris.
I think that what's also different this time around, as you mentioned, campaigns have always been dirty. Millionaires, billionaires have always tried to use their money to influence elections and donate to the politicians that they like. I think what's different is that they're so vocal about it. Usually it's journalists who kind of have to dig a little bit and figure out, oh, this one's donating to this campaign. Now you've got literally like Elon Musk on the campaign trail and just so open. Same thing with, as you were mentioning, Mark Cuban.
Yeah, so Mark Cuban for the Democrats, right? Then you have Elon Musk having his own town hall meetings, writing these checks. Never seen it like that before. He's also using X pretty openly. I mean, he's using his social media platform, Twitter, or formerly Twitter, X, to be very overtly for Trump. I think he's taken the @America name on Twitter and made that a pro-Trump handle. So very overt here. Though again, we should mention, you know, billionaires are out there. On the Republican side, you got Timothy Mellon of the famous Andrew Mellon billionaires like Carnegie Mellon University. He's given $125 million. The Uline family, they've given $60 million. The shipping company, casino magnate Miriam Adelson, she's given about $100 million. And then again, Mark Cuban on the Dem side. You also have Reid Hoffman, the LinkedIn co-founder. He's given about $20 million. Then you have Mike Bloomberg as well, who's given tens of millions of dollars for the Democrats. The billionaires are out there, but as you know, we've talked about here, more overt than ever.
All right, time now for the speed read from CBS News. The U.S. is investigating the unauthorized leak of classified documents about Israel's plans to attack Iran. The documents ended up on pro-Iran social media channels on the Telegram app. The documents are attributed to the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency and the National Security Agency, and note that Israel was still moving military assets in place to conduct a military strike in response to Iran's ballistic missile attack earlier this month. The documents were marked top secret and were somehow posted to a Telegram channel called Middle East Spectator on Thursday. The report details measures that have been carried out in recent days at several Israeli Air Force bases, including the transfer of advanced munitions, which, according to the report, were intended for an attack on Iran. It also states that the Israeli Air Force conducted a large exercise this week involving intelligence planes and likely fighter jets trained for a possible attack against Iran. The intelligence report also detailed preparations in Israeli drone units for an attack against Iran.
So U.S. officials are extremely concerned about the potentially major security breach here after the intel documents about the preparations here were published on that Telegram account. Relations, we've talked about, are already strained between the Biden administration and the Netanyahu government in Israel. In fact, over the weekend, among the things Trump spoke about was his recent phone conversations with the Israeli prime minister. He's also talking to Netanyahu pretty frequently here. They happen to have a close relationship. And Trump claimed over the weekend that Netanyahu told him that he doesn't even listen to Biden anymore because his advice has been so bad. Again, that's Trump's claim about what Netanyahu told him, but wouldn't shock anyone, but it wouldn't shock us based on the strained relations, again, between Biden and Netanyahu. So the Telegram channel that we talked about here involved in the leak is actually identified as being based in Tehran. It has in the past published memes featuring the Iranian supreme leader, talking about support for the axis of resistance here. So that in particular is concerning. Jill, we've covered on this podcast that huge leak that came from the Air National Guardsman Jack Teixeira back in Massachusetts last year on the Discord channel. So already a heightened state of alert here about U.S. Top secret intelligence and its ability to be leaked. The question here, how much of this came from the Israeli government? How much of this was intel collected by the U.S. government on Israel? No shocker to anybody. Everyone spies on each other here. But this does come as the Israelis have been completing weeks of preparations here for a retaliatory attack against Iran. Remember, Iran attacked Israel most recently with a barrage of ballistic missiles on October 1st in response to a couple assassinations Israel had conducted. So now Israel will be counterattacking to Iran's attack. So this leak could be an attempt to disrupt the Israeli operation, unlikely to disrupt anything here. The investigation, though, is going to be looking into a variety of things, whether it was intentional, whether it was obtained via another method, whether U.S. intelligence is compromised by an outside entity, or again, whether it was intentionally leaked by someone inside U.S. intelligence. So there's going to be a lot of digging here to figure out what the intentions were.
And sticking with the Middle East, from Axios, an explosive drone launched by Hezbollah from Lebanon hit Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's private home in a coastal town in the northern part of the country this weekend. It is the first time since the beginning of the war that a target affiliated directly with Netanyahu has been hit. The Prime Minister and his wife were not at the residence at the time of the attack. There were no casualties. 3 drones were launched from Lebanon and crossed into Israeli airspace. Israeli officials say 2 were intercepted by Israeli attack helicopters, but the third eluded them. Afterwards, Prime Minister Netanyahu says that, quote, the agents of Iran who tried to assassinate me and my wife today made a bitter mistake. He says in a statement that the attack will not deter him from continuing the war and that anyone who harms Israelis will pay a heavy price.
Yeah, the Israeli government now says they're going to take this into account as they consider their response here to the Iranian missile attack earlier this month. And the Israeli government tries to make a point here that they see a difference between Israel's attacks and assassinations of terror, the heads of terror groups, versus the attack on Netanyahu's life. Israel has made clear that it seeks to eliminate the heads of terror groups like the U.S. and other Western powers have done. But at the end of the day, Israel is a democratic sovereign state whose prime minister has now been targeted, and they believe that is something completely different. So they say that Iran will now pay the price here. Iran, by the way, tried to distance itself over the weekend, saying, we had nothing to do with this. This was totally Hezbollah. We weren't involved in this. Now, Hezbollah, at the end of the day, gets all of its weapons and support from the Iranian government. So those denials not being taken very seriously on the Israeli side. At the same time, though, there's some interesting analyses out over the weekend, Jill, on the concern within Iran when it comes to a potential Israeli counterattack, how vulnerable they feel, especially since Israel in particular in the past couple of months has had overwhelming success against Hezbollah, their proxy group, against Hamas, their proxy group, being able to infiltrate Iran and assassinate the head of Hamas inside Tehran. And so the Iranian government is really concerned right now because it also feels like the gloves are off from the Israelis, that they're pretty unrestrained, that whatever the Americans tell them not to do, they don't really care anymore. And so Iran has a very fragile economy. It also comes as we covered those protests in Iran over the last couple of years. So there is this Iranian internal opposition and an interesting debate happening inside Iran among all the people who hate the government there, the Islamic regime. Some have said they kind of hope Israel really takes out the regime and really hits a lot of spots because it could facilitate the downfall of the leadership there. Then there are others who say, we got to bring down the government here, but we're not going to support Israel. Israel is dangerous and will bring suffering to the Iranian population here. So interesting dynamic at play here when it comes to how Iran feels and whether Iran, that's why there was this internal debate in the Islamic regime about how far to go with Israel, because ultimately, the side that won over, probably the more aggressive side, saying 180 missiles, has now stirred up the Israeli counterattack, which could be very serious, and again, could make quite an impact on the Iranian economy and destabilize the regime there.
Right. And in terms of the relationship between Israel and the United States, or at least between Netanyahu and Biden, after Yahya Sinwar, the mastermind of October 7th, was killed in Rafah, a city that Kamala Harris and President Biden had warned Israel not to launch any type of major attack in. A lot of Israelis, at least in the analysis that I was listening to, were saying, this is why we had to go into Rafah. What if we'd actually listened to the Americans and not done it?
Yeah, where we're at year 2 of the war here is that the influence of the West, in particular the U.S. government, is much more diminished than, say, where we were a year ago.
From Reuters, Cuba's electrical grid collapsed again on Sunday, the 4th failure in just the last 48 hours, as a looming hurricane threatens to wreak further havoc on the island's decrepit infrastructure. Cuba has said Sunday it was making headway restoring service after multiple false starts, although millions of people are still without electricity more than 2 days after the grid's initial collapse. About 11 million people live in Cuba. The clock was ticking as Hurricane Oscar bore down on the Caribbean island on Sunday, threatening to further complicate the government's efforts to reestablish service. Authorities warned, quote, an extremely dangerous situation in eastern Cuba. The entire region was largely without electricity or communication ahead of the storm, which packed winds as high as 100 miles per hour. The communist-run government canceled school through Wednesday, which is pretty unprecedented in Cuba, citing both the hurricane and the ongoing energy crisis. Officials said only essential workers should report to work on Monday.
Yeah, so the people of Cuba have always, in going back now 70 years, have had to make do with shortages of food, medicine, and fuel at times. But the crisis of the past couple of weeks, now past couple of months here, have really hit them at a historic level. We should note some of the power grid here is decades old, more than 50 or 60 years old. And so intermittent power outages are normal, but the entire island going dark repeatedly here is something that many Cubans have not experienced at this level. So there are some various videos of protests that are popping up on social media here, though they have a blockage of social media in Cuba. The communist government, the communist regime there does impose that. But we are seeing signs that the people are discontent. And this comes for a variety of reasons why Cuba is in such disarray. One, they depend on imports to feed their very obsolete oil-fired power plants. Fuel deliveries have dropped significantly this year because who do they depend on? Venezuela, Russia, and Mexico, who have all slashed their exports to Cuba. Venezuela is their key ally. They've depended on them. They're nearby. And Venezuela has its own problems trying to supply its own market because the Venezuelan government has fallen apart. They can't even produce enough oil. They're at basically a minuscule amount of where they were a decade ago. So they have cut their deliveries of subsidized oil to Cuba. That's made it more costly. Then you have the Mexican government, the new government there, that's also cut flows to Cuba. And Russia, well, they're involved in the war in Ukraine and have their own energy issues. So they haven't been able to support Cuba. So while there has been variations of a U.S. trade embargo here going back to John F. Kennedy. And so the Cubans are very quick to blame the U.S. It's the U.S. trade embargo. They've had alternatives. They've been a client state of the then Soviet Union, then Russia, then Venezuela for years. But now those countries have their own problems. And so Cuba is left on its own here. So a crisis in Cuba they're contending with. We'll wake up this morning and see the aftermath of Hurricane Oscar. By the way, Cuba is not so far from Florida, but for those of you curious about Hurricane Oscar, it does not threaten, as of right now, the U.S. Oscar's making this turn through Cuba and then this hard right back north and then northeast. So it's set to go over the Bahamas and then out to sea. So no threat as of now from Hurricane Oscar to any of us here in the U.S.
All right, now to some business news from Insider. Chief, which is a networking organization for women in executive positions, has cut staff across the company in a restructuring effort. A spokesperson for the company says that it would give Chief more agility moving forward. Chief describes itself as the nation's largest network of senior executive women. The company said its members, 40% of which are C-suite executives, represent over 10,000 companies. In March of 2022, the company had a valuation of about $1 billion.
But since then, they've had a string of setbacks. There were a whole bunch of layoffs last spring. Of course, this new round of layoffs we're telling you about today. And then earlier this year, they had to close their London offices and withdrew from a planned international expansion. They said at the time they were refocusing on the American market.
From the Washington Post, a look at the popularity of tattoos among women. Today, more American women than men have tattoos. According to the Pew Research Center, 38% of women have tattoos versus 27% of men. Looking deeper into the numbers, 56% of women ages 18 to 29 and 53% of women ages 30 to 49 have tattoos. Their popularity among women reflects changing attitudes about a practice that was once male-dominated. Today, many women are choosing tattoos as important signifiers of empowerment, identity, and personal values, according to experts. Frequently, they use body art to honor something or someone or cope with trauma. Women who have escaped human trafficking, for example, often alter or remove their branding tattoos as a way of rejecting the past and starting over. That is according to Our Rescue, which is a trafficking survivors support organization. Also, many women just find tattoos fun and a modern fashion statement.
At the same time in this story, they talked to some medical experts and health experts who want to reinforce a general health warning when it comes to tattoos, specifically for women, a reminder that the FDA does not regulate the dyes that are used, and they only are taken off the market if they are alerted to any sort of mass bacterial contamination or other issues with the ingredients. And the FDA does not regulate tattoo parlors. They fall under state and local health departments. So, in particular, when it comes to women, they want to remind women that there are some risks related to pregnancy and tattoos. Of course, beyond allergic reactions and infections that, of course, also affect men, tattoos can sometimes cause problems during pregnancy, childbirth, and breastfeeding. Jill, I was learning from this story that a lower back tattoo sometimes makes giving an epidural difficult because injecting that numbing medication into a space around spinal nerves is very tricky because they don't want the needle to pass through skin cells with dyes, because then the dyes are going to get into a place they don't want. And obviously those dyes not regulated medically there. So just fair warning there before you get inked.
And finally, from NBC Sports, the New York Yankees are going to the World Series after beating the Cleveland Guardians 5-2 in Game 5 of the American League Championship Series on Saturday. It is a return to baseball's biggest stage for the Yankees, who haven't played in the World Series since winning it in 2009. While the 15-year drought does not seem very long, it tied the franchise's record for the largest gap between pennants. While the Yankees have been absent from the World Series, they have been in the playoffs nearly every season and have reached 5 AL Championship Series during that time. The Yankees' 3 most recent losses in the Championship Series were at the hands of the Houston Astros, who have been the most dominant team in the American League for nearly a decade.
Yeah, so looking back here historically, this is going to be the 41st World Series for the New York Yankees. There's a lot of baseball fans out there who are like, we would take just one of those. We would take one of those New York Yankees. For the record, this will be the Yankees' 41st World Series, and they will be facing another storied franchise, the LA Dodgers. It's an LA New York World Series this year, starting Friday night in LA. We mentioned for the Yankees, this is their 41st ever World Series. For the Dodgers, it's going to be their 22nd World Series and their 4th World Series in 8 years. The Dodgers last night eliminating the New York Mets, who had quite a season themselves. The Dodgers defeating them 10-5 in Game 6 of the NL Championship Series. So there were hopes in New York that there would be a Subway Series. We haven't had one of those for about 25 years now. We haven't had one of those for more than 2 decades, since the year 2000. But alas, the Mets were not able to take down the Dodgers. So it will be an LA-New York series. And it's going to be the 12th ever series, the most ever between any two teams, between the Yankees and the Dodgers. But it's their first one since 1980 in their overall matchup. The Yankees-Dodgers go back decades, back to when the Dodgers were playing out of Brooklyn. So in their 11 matchups all time in the World Series, the Yankees have won 8 times, the Dodgers have won 3 times, and this will be their 12th ever matchup. So looking forward to that starting Friday night. Sorry again to the Mets fans and the Cleveland fans who were disappointed over the weekend, especially those Mets fans. I feel you guys as a Cubs fan. Meanwhile, staying with sports news, big news out of the WNBA last night as the New York Liberty won their first ever WNBA championship, 28 years as a team there in the WNBA, but they had never won before. So a big deal for New Yorkers. It's also their first basketball championship in more than 5 decades here, since the Knicks won back in the early 70s. So the New York Liberty winning the WNBA championship last night with a victory over the Minnesota Lynx, 67-62 in overtime. So congrats to the New York Liberty. All right, now time for On This Day in History. We begin in 1520, 504 years ago today. Ferdinand Magellan discovered the gateway to circumnavigating the globe. On this day, Magellan and 3 ships entered the strait that would be named after him, the Straits of Magellan, sailing between the mainland tip of South America and the island of Tierra del Fuego to enter the Pacific Ocean. This was a big deal. Discovered the entry point. Everyone had tried to poke their way through the Americas, and Magellan went all the way down and around. On this day in 1833, Swedish chemist, engineer, and the inventor of dynamite, Alfred Nobel, was born. He would also go to found the Nobel Prize for Peace. But fun fact for you, Alfred Nobel made his money inventing dynamite and other powerful explosives.
Ironic, Moshe?
Isn't it? That's what Alanis Morissette based her song on. No, she didn't. It was not based on Alfred Nobel, but among...
It could have been. It should have been.
Among... Yes.
The things that she said were ironic were not.
Right. Rain on your wedding day?
Yeah, it's just...
No, rain on your wedding day is not ironic.
Not
it's
ironic.
It's kind of annoying to some people.
Yeah.
But for other people, good luck. All right, let's fast forward to 1964. The answer to our clue at the top. The rain in Spain falls mainly in the plain. Many of you might have gotten this one right. My Fair Lady, starring Rex Harrison and Audrey Hepburn, had its world premiere in theaters on this day, later winning 8 Academy Awards. Jill, I performed in My Fair Lady in high school, in our high school musical.
I knew that rolled off your tongue rather easily.
Though I didn't have a major role. I was just like a townsperson. I was like a villager.
You were in the chorus?
I was in the chorus, performing behind Eliza Doolittle. On this day in 1992, sign of the times, Jill, I don't know if you would remember this. On this day in history, in 1992, Mattel announces that Teen Talk Barbie would no longer say the phrase, math class is tough.
Good move, Mattel,
Good
actually.
move, Mattel. But culturally acceptable, apparently, until 1992, to have a doll bought by millions of young girls say things like math class is tough.
At least the next line wasn't like, Ken, can you help me?
I don't know. We haven't gone far back through all the Barbie dolls, but hopefully not. Finally, here we end with the music history. On this day in 1957, Jailhouse Rock by Elvis Presley goes to number 1 in America. On this day in 1980, Bruce Springsteen releases Hungry Heart. And on this day in 2022, 2 years ago today, Midnights was released. And we all learned that it's me. I'm the problem. It's me.
If you're going to do the line, do it right. It's me. Hi. I'm the problem. It's me.
All right, Jill. Okay. Well, I'll get it right for the 3rd birthday next October.
Quickly, before we go, I do want to mention on Friday's podcast, I had talked about the essay that I wrote about anti-Semitism in America that I had published on Substack. And we had said that we were going to put the link to it in our show notes, which I admittedly forgot to do. And we got a bunch of emails about it and people messaged on Instagram. It is in today's show notes. So I apologize, everybody.
Go to the show notes.
Yes.
And there you can click on Jill's essay.
Yes. And thank you all for your interest in reading it. I really appreciate it. And again, it is for sure in today's show notes.
All right, everyone, have a good one.
In the words of Taylor Swift, it's me. Hi, I'm the problem. It's me.